Hello and welcome on React Native track. So let me share my screen first. Okay, I hope you can see it. You can double click on the presentation for better view content. So once again, hello and welcome on my today's presentation. Undefined is not a function. I guess that there is no JavaScript developer that has never seen this error, either in the browser console or on the red screen while developing React Native apps. But first thing first, let me do a quick introduction about myself. My name is Maciek and I'm part of very talented React Native team at Netguru. If at some point you decide to join us, there is a chance that we will meet during the recruitment process. But today we are not going to talk about me and the HR stuff. We will rather be talking about React Native. And you can ask what is more interesting in React Native than debugging its sometimes unexpected errors. To be honest, tons of things like augmented reality, talking with digital humans, or complex animations and gestures. If you, just like me, are interested in those topics, you have to also stay for the next presentation. Patrick, our R&D leader, will cover them and even more interesting things that we are working on. So, if there are so many more interesting topics, why did I decide to talk about the debugging? Because I know how hard it is to find materials about it. And let's be honest, debugging is one of these skills that every developer should have. And for those reasons, I find this topic very important. So let's start with a question. What is debugging? I could give you a definition from Wikipedia, but you aren't here for encyclopedic knowledge, I guess. So let me introduce the real life definition of debugging. To describe what debugging is, I will use the known group of sentences visible on the screen. Dealing with unexpected errors, fixing logic business bugs, and visual misalignments is the big part of our job as a software engineers. Having debugging skills helps making I hate programming part much shorter and less frustrating. We can easier identify and solve problems. And make our time to Eureka shorter. To be good at debugging, you just need two things. First of all, you need to have a right approach to successfully solve those bugs. The second necessary thing is knowledge of the available tools that help to solve the problems. So let's start with the right approach. Then we will jump into tools. I'm not the big fan of reinventing the wheel. That's why I really like to take inspirations from others. Spencer Carley, you may know him from React Native School, described the debugging process in 6 steps that are visible on the screen. First of all, you have to identify the issue. To fix it, you need to be sure about steps to reproduce. Isolating and simplifying issue is a process of taking off as many variables as possible. Imagine that you have a form that on submit triggers async redux action with API call. The form has many required fields that have to be filled before submitting. Sounds complicated and time-consuming, right? In this particular case, to isolate and simplify the issue, just find or create another way to trigger that action without filling the whole form each time. Maybe you can hard code some variables. maybe you can use another tool to trigger Redux action. Also, consider using external tool like Postman to test the API connection first. Once you've done it, you should be pretty sure where the problem lays. Take your time and find the fix in isolated conditions. After that, use that fix in the place where the bug originally occurred. Finally, the good practice is adding tests to provided solution to make sure that it won't happen again. It's also possible to move the last stage upper if you follow TDD pattern. To be totally clear, the presented process describes development debugging process. But we know that life is not a fairy tale and bugs happen on the released apps as well. How the process differs if the bug is already deployed? The core of the process stayed the same with some slight differences. First of all, we should probably hurry up more with delivering the fix to the real users. The next difference is about identify phase. To identify the issue, we have to use some external services like Bugsnag, Sentry, Crashlytics, or similar. Those tools provide detailed information about crashes, unhandled exceptions in the already released apps. According to that data, we are able to establish steps to reproduce. We have an additional process. Step, which is the releasing of the fix. And the last thing that is worth to mention is that production bugs are more stressful. No one likes receiving email alerts about new crashes or trending issues. That's why it's so important to know the tool for faster debugging. Before we jump into the available tools, let me introduce my personal rating system. To do a comparison of the presented tools, I decided to rate them basing on the three main factors: utility, setup time, and uniquenesses. The first two factors don't need deeper explanation, I believe. But when it comes to the uniquenesses, the higher rate is, the more unique features it offers. One more thing before we move on, keep in mind that those ratings are very, very subjective. First tool that I want to introduce to you is Metro Bundler. Besides running the JavaScript server, it comes with out-of-the-box support for JavaScript logging. It can display information on the three different levels: logs, warnings, and errors. The biggest drawback of this solution is that logs are not formatted, so they are really hard to read. Metro Bundler logs is definitely nice to have addition, but let's be honest, in debugging context, it's not a game changer. And let me remind you that those ratings are totally subjective. So if you are a console log guy, just like a Drake, which is totally fine, your personal rating could look like this. Let's leave Drake for a moment and move to the next tool, Logbox, which was officially released in React Native 0.63, is a React Native core team answer to developers' feedback about poor debug experience. As we can read in the official announcement, the team focused on three primary goals. They wanted to make Logbox concise, so logs should provide the minimum amount of information necessary to debug an issue. Logs should be also formatted so that you can quickly find the information that you need. Also, logs should be actionable. It means that you can fix the issue and move on. And as you can see on this comparison photo, they did a really great job with the code frame component and call stack, it's easier to find the source of the issue. To summarize, I feel that rewriting red and yellow boxes to the new logbox was a great move and improved developer experience. The next tool in the React Native developer arsenal is different from previous one. Inspector, available from the developer menu, is a tool used for visual debugging. It works similar to Chrome Elements Debugger. It allows to see the component styles, details, as well as its breadcrumbs. You can debug touchables area as well using the last tab. Those are quite impressive features, but its full potential can be achieved by integrating them with React Native DevTools. Inspector might be handy if you want to quickly check the component styles or touchables areas. It's not the most comfortable thing, as the inspector interface overlays the app. It has unique highlighting component features, but as I said before, it achieves the full potential in connection with React DevTools. As mentioned before, the inspector tool integrates with React DevTools. This combination provides much better developer experience, as React Native DevTools provides very clear interface with full component tree and detailed view for each component. React DevTools is a standalone app for visual debugging React and React Native apps. Besides displaying the full component tree, React DevTools offer features like styling prototyping. It allows us to quickly prototype the styles straight from the DevTool windows. It's not so cool since fast refresh work as expected. Access to props and state for each component is available in the details view, so we can easily manipulate them from the React DevTools to see how the component responds to those changes. It also supports hooks syntax and offers search feature, which is helpful with traversing those complex component trees. In my opinion, React DevTools is the best available solution for visual debugging React Native apps. Setup isn't so complicated. To start describing the next tool, which is Chrome Remote Debugger, we need to understand how it's even possible to use Chrome browser to debug mobile apps. The graphic on the screen presents the current architecture of the React Native app. There are 3 parallel threads running in every React Native app. The JS thread is where the old JavaScript code is running and where most of the business logic of the app happens. The native thread is responsible for handle the user interface. It communicates with the JS thread whenever there is a need to update the UI or access the native functions. The shadow thread is where the layout is calculated. Shadow thread and UR thread have to run on the mobile device, but JS is different. Yes, we know that JS is different, but sometimes that's our advantage. We can run JavaScript code somewhere else than directly on the device that runs React Native app. For example, in Chrome browser. Chrome Debugger offers 3 main features. Console to display formatted logs, Network tab to see the network request made from JavaScript code, and Sources tab that allow us to do some classic debugging. By classic debugging, I mean controlling code execution by setting the breakpoints. This technique is very powerful as it allows us to stop the code in any moment. Thanks to that, we are able to check the call stack, the current variable states, and to execute code in the controlled way. So, to assume, Remote Debugger offers features that are helpful with solving different kinds of issues. But on the other hand, we can find those features in other debugging apps as well. We've been talking about React DevTools and Remote Debugger in Chrome before. It is worth to mention that there is a standalone app called React Native Debugger that combines two utilities and adds Redux DevTools module. Redux DevTools, marked on the screen, provides a set of features to debug Redux. It allows us to debug dispatched actions, state changes, and even there is a possibility to dispatch our own actions directly from the interface. Having those three tools displayed in the one window can be very handy, especially if Redux is in your stack. Microsoft loves React Native. More and more their apps uses this framework. By the way, did you know that the new Xbox Store interface is built with React Native? How cool is that? Almost as cool as having possibility to debug React Native apps directly from the code editor. We are able to do that by installing the Microsoft's React Native Tools extension for Visual Studio Code. This extension contains highly configurable React Native debugger inside the code editor. It allows us to set and manage breakpoints, see the variables divided into the closures on each code execution pause. Additionally, we can control the code execution by step over, step into, and step out actions. So to see the order of the code execution. Moreover, it can even stop on the unhandled exceptions, so we can easily check the application state in this particular moment. Personally, I find this type of debugging directly from the code editor as the most effective one. I'm sorry, Drake, but don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean that I stopped using console logs. Hell no. Console logs are much faster when you want to quickly check some variables. But when I need to solve a heavy bug, I use the React Native debugger from React Native Tools extension. I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't used React.run so much to make a deep description of it. This tool created by Infinity Red is still on my list tools I want to learn more. But from other developers' experience, I know that this is kind of powerful and plugging extensible software. Besides the standard features like logging or displaying network requests, it offers extra plugins for Redux Saga, MobX State Tree, or even Storybook. Thanks to the image overlay feature, we are able to create pixel-perfect user interface much easier. And last but not least, Flipper. Probably Flipper is one of the newest tools among other presented. Created by Facebook, this open source tool officially supports React Native from version 0.62. It is used in Facebook for native iOS and Android apps too. Flipper tool is unique as it allows us to debug our mobile app on two different layers, native and React Native, at the same time. It offers features like Crash Reporter, mentioned before, React DevTools, Network Inspector to view the JS, and also native network requests made by device applications. It also allows us to see Metro and device logs. Moreover, there is a native layout inspector that allows us to see the native component hierarchy. Additionally, since Flipper is an extensible platform, it provides a marketplace that pulls plugins from NPM, so we can easily publish and install custom plugins specific for our stack. Flipper is a great platform that allow us to have almost all in one place. It's a new tool, but I'm looking forward on it as it's open sourced and extensible for community plugins. There are already implemented plugins for Redux or React. In the summary, I want to go back to the image from the beginning of the presentation. And I hope that after my talk, you will be able to redefine this graphic to something more positive. Maybe you will find debugging phase shorter. Maybe you will be able to stop hating programming so much. And at the end, maybe we can add some positive vibes to this graphic. And this is what we need in these uncertain times. And here goes all of the credits. And thank you very much for attention.
Hey, Maciek, thank you for the presentation. And I just saw there is no questions on a chat. Oh, maybe one. I should just ask you, what was the most complicated or challenging issue that you resolved thanks to debugging?
Oh, that's a tricky question, especially when I'm kind of stressful. But let me think. I believe that this issue was strictly connected to the debugger, because I had some problems with parsing dates, and it came out that the problem was basically because of debugger, because as I mentioned to you, the JavaScript code, while we run the code on the browser, is using different engine, and V8 engine has some slight differences between those engines that run in directly in the mobile phone. So I didn't know that the parsing of dates are kind of different in V8 and other languages, and I I really learned a lot from this issue, because before that I didn't know about those differences. And now if something works on the debugger and doesn't work when the debugger is off, I know where to look for the issues. I'm not sure if it answered your question at all, but it was the only thing that came to my mind.
Mm-hmm. Great, nice. And we have another question from Wojciech. What do you think about React Native instability, especially when you install a new library?
Okay, so I think that React Native is pretty mature framework, because it's on the market like for 5 years maybe. I know that let's say it's not stable yet. It's not yet 1.0 because the core team is working on some big re-architecture, which will make the React Native even better. But to be honest, you mentioned that especially when you install the new library, you find some issues. So my suggestion is to pick the right libraries, because some of them aren't maintained anymore. Some of them aren't compatible with the newest version of React Native. So I believe if you face the problems with external library, always first of all take a look at the stars number. It's quite important. Secondly, take a look at the issues tab on the GitHub. And the third thing is to check where was the last update of the library. And I believe that if something is not maintained, you can find an alternative for it, which is maintained, of course.
Okay, great. And we have some fans of console log. So what do you use on your daily basis? Maybe you could recommend something to them.
Just console logs. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Basically, I use React Native Debugger from VS Code. I like, as I said, I like do some, let's say, classic debugging. But recently, I started using Flipper more because it offers some unique features, like it shows the native tree of the components, and it's very helpful, especially if you just like me working with some native technologies. So we can simply see what our React Native view is in the real native component tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I think
but I use a console logs a lot, believe me.
As we all. Exactly. Okay, thank you. I think that's all the questions. If you have any more, you can ask them on chat right now, and we will add them to the conference summary for you with all the answers. So I think we see each other in 3 minutes. So have a short break, grab a cup of coffee, and we'll see on my presentation about R&D.
Okay.
Thank you, and see you.
Time for attendance. Bye.